most patient with this as I should. Welcome to Reading with Robin. I can, in fact, pursue my dream of doing the show without wearing pants. The only thing is there are a bunch of mosquitoes. You may notice I'm wearing kind of silly hat. It's not my usual pseudo-intellectual attire. I don't know if the combination of silly hat and lack of pants is going to lead to a very intellectually underwhelming episode. I'm just trying to bring you the good content from wherever in the world we may be and wherever in the world you may be. And that brings us to today's topic, the world. Oh, motherfucker. Okay, I'm gonna put some pants on. So when we think about nature, it's the ideal, get away from the craziness of the city, and then you have to deal with mosquitoes and horseflies, and you're like, maybe cities don't have it that bad after all. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Okay for work. How do you explain that magical, ineffable element that defines or draws the limits between good and bad? Being a great outdoorsman, give you some survival tips in this episode too. Shout out to Bear Grylls, not the enema and the lifeboat, nor the sheeping bag. Gathering your bearings, that's man versus wild back in the day when it was good. He got a lot of shit because they're saying that, okay, they'd go to these exotic remote locations, but then he'd spend the night in a hotel. What we see is the illusion of ideology, and we're all, I guess, in the net of ideology, regardless of what our positioning may be. That's the thing that I guess is so frustrating about these concepts like ideology, because you can say oh, we're beyond ideology, or you can see through it and undermine it, but no, it's all... That was the edifice of ideology toppling over. Probably get eaten by a mink. I remember when I saw Antichrist at the cinema when I came out, and the scene where it comes across the fox in the wild, and then the fox speaks and says, "Chaos reigns." I remember I got a big laugh in the audience. I felt like the laughter was not the best response possible. I mean, I'm not judging it. I can totally see how there is this kind of comedic element in there too, but there are all these other layers that I think laughter sometimes can conceal or help wash over. See, this is the problem now. I'm getting like one of these horse flies again. I want to bite a chunk of your flesh out. Last episode we were looking at Picnic at Hanging Rock. Briefly mentioned, I guess, the distinction between civilization and the comforts of civilization and nature as this unforgiving entity that nevertheless has this allure. Where is this line traced in our psyche? I think any good survivalist knows a knife is like your best friend. It'll get you through the long night. I think a Swiss Army knife in many ways is like a perfect object to sum up this paradoxical relationship of civilization and wild, and all these kind of fantasies that we maybe harvest, especially as city dwellers, male city dwellers. The fantasy of being the rugged survivalist type, and you carry around a Swiss Army knife, but what you use it for mostly is for the corkscrew. The corkscrew can be quite a deadly weapon. I mean, it becomes quite the appropriate image of the failure to become this true rugged survivalist, even though potentially it holds these other tools. I do use the screwdriver quite a bit, like for screwing on camera accessories and whatnot. A true survivalist should probably not know what this is, but this is a very kind of cool gadget. I don't know if it has any other functions. I know it has a finer tip screwdriver built in. This little gadget is actually a can opener, and you can technically open a can completely by doing this. It's just a bit more manual. But I use it very often to puncture holes in our maple syrup cans. You know how you do like one hole on one side and one hole on the other side, to have an air vent so that you can really let that brown, delicious syrup flow. Me and this knife, we've been through a lot. I said I would teach you some survival skills. The premise implies a certain degree of stupidity. To employ these survival skills, you need to put yourself in a situation. What we have here is a nice boulder, and this is a typical situation where you say, oh, I can climb this. And okay, it's maybe not the easiest thing to do, but it's doable. But what you don't foresee is that once you get up, it's actually quite difficult to get back down. To show you that this is a totally solid rock, it's not a prop. As you can see, there's basically no service. I don't know if we'll be able to focus on this little thing here, Or it's probably not in focus there, but no service. So first thing I see is there are a bunch of spider webs everywhere. Quite pretty, but I think humans have an innate fear of spiders for some reason. Huh. Okay, well, we'll get there. Here, another foot here, here, up here. Is this a good idea? I don't know. Well, we see the summit. So yeah, this is, I guess, a typical situation where I can see now that I can quite easily reach the top, but getting into this position to lower yourself down implies that you can't really see where you're going to place your feet, so your natural survival instinct will kick in and you'll just panic like a little boy up on the rock and called for help. But as you can see, we're in the middle of nowhere, have no cell phone signal, I'm by myself. Do an applause to... Also, I gotta be careful here because some of this rock is spiders. Let's get rid of that. See, the tumble wouldn't be that much fun. So already I'm having trouble seeing where. Good idea, bad idea. Here's where my inner scaredy cat is kicking in. Because it looks quite high now. And maybe I'll just stay here. It's interesting, these rocks are actually like puzzle pieces. Legs are getting tired now, so it's always an interesting thing. I got this crazy sunburn from doing a modular synthesis outside. This is my primary tweaking hand. See, my hand's all red. Very sensitive to the sun, that's why I'm almost dressed like an Amish boy here, except for this little silly cap. I think I have enough sunscreen to survive. Been trying to find an answer to how the role of the victim, what are the limits to the concept of the victim? Re-engage with René Girard. Because we think of the victim here, he's speaking of like Jesus as a victim and how Christianity put forth a model where you defend the victim because there's this like, mimetic desire is kind of subverted and put more towards the victim. Very much the way I think desire and language operates in the psychoanalytic field. Is like your desire is not your desire. Your desire is the desire of the other. And this is something like super Lacanian, and there's a certain ambiguity in this phrase which is really interesting because the desire of the other works at two levels. It's desiring the other, but it's also what the other desires. So I think at this level, this is where like the where mimetic desire operates. It's something that can never really truly be satisfied. Going down the rabbit hole of theory. In a society, mimetic desire leads to this escalating of conflict and violence. There's a tendency to find the victim that will be the scapegoat to channel and bring relief to all this built-up tension. It's pretty basic in many ways, but what's interesting is how he actually fits this into his analysis of different structures, different societies, different ideologies. An aggregate of humans, a collective, can all of a sudden focus all their energy on this one thing, this one concept, and it becomes a specific individual. The examples that are brought up here more often is like, oh, the victim is the outsider, has some kind of flaw, is a freak somehow. And because of this difference, this individual, which doesn't have to be an individual, it can be a group too, according to me, how a group, a dominating group of people in a society can choose one outcast as the victim that will be sacrificed in some ways. And of course the sacrifice, I think, well, back in the day it used to be quite brutal. They'd actually draw and quarter, crucify, whatnot, do some kind of intense act of violence to release his tension. But this idea of the victim, it's very much tied to the concept of innocence. When you say victim, you're thinking, oh, this is somebody who is not necessarily at fault. How does this concept at a structural level apply to individuals that we perceive as evil, who become the target of collective rage? But the question that is raised here, I think, or what is implied is justice then only kind of a temporary easing of tension? And so this brings us to the question of bigger structural change. How do we go forth? Yeah, anyway, food for thought, I guess. Light subject as usual. So let's just choose a paragraph kind of at random here. Many archaic laws, notably in Africa, put to death all twins who are born in the community, or sometimes only one twin of each pair. Without doubt, this law is absurd, but in no way does it prove the truth of cultural relativism. The cultures that do not tolerate twins confuse their natural resemblance in the biological order with the leveling effects of mimetic rivalries. The more these rivalries are aggravated, the more the roles of model, obstacle, and imitator become interchangeable at the heart of mimetic conflict. In short, to the extent that their antagonism becomes embittered, a paradox occurs. The antagonists resemble one another more and more. They confront one another all the more implacably because their conflict dissolves the real differences that formerly separated them. Envy, jealousy, and hate render alike those they possess. But in our world, people tend to misunderstand or ignore the resemblances and identities that these passions generate. They have ears only for the deceptive celebration of differences, which rages more than ever in our societies, not because real differences are increasing, but because they are disappearing. The children repeat the crimes of their fathers precisely because they believe they are morally superior to them. This false difference is already the mimetic illusion of modern individualism, which represents the greatest resistance to the mimetic truth that is reenacted again and again in human relations. The paradox is that the resistance itself brings about the reenactment. So we've learned now that rock is harder than wood. It's a process of conversion. You send some wood out into the sea. Years later, it will bring it back properly treated into nice driftwood that you can use for sculptures. So that's, I guess, a survival tip for an artist. It's not very useful for getting food or anything, but art is food for the soul. So the water is like pretty cold here. I've gone in a couple of times. It always takes a couple of tries to work the courage to just plunge in. So I feel with this rock, it's probably the same. As I said, this episode is a survival episode, all about surviving. Work on our camera angle here. Get me to be the focal point, as I should be. I'm not sure what's going on with the focus. I don't have my monitor here. If you're gonna be out in the wild, I highly recommend, because space is precious, so you can't take too many things that'll weigh you down, slow you down, and you'll fall victim to mink out here. So you need to take things that can perform many tasks and don't take up much space. So I would recommend taking this turkey thermometer. That's the official name for this. I just measured the water temperature. Measured at a nice toasty 11 degrees Celsius. This doubles as quite the lethal weapon. As you can see, this one's it's a bit blunt by now because I've used it a couple of times to fend off some mink. And the thing that's great about it is you just thrust it into the heart of the creature, and pretty soon you'll get a very accurate bodily temperature reading. So first you'll know if it's suffering of COVID or not, so that's pretty important. And secondly, you'll know if it's warm enough for you to sleep in. If you're exposed out at night, temperature drops quite a bit. Potentially build yourself a thermally appropriate wetsuit out of a collection of mink that you've stabbed with this thermometer. Do a nice little calculation of the thickness of the fat and fur, and you can calculate how much time you could survive in the frigid waters of the Bay of Fundy. So yeah, this would be my suggestion of a weapon/tool. Once you kill a mink and you cook it, you can also see when it's done. It packs quite nicely. Just make sure that you don't put it in a spot where it'll actually poke you. But yeah, don't you wish you were like a man or woman of adventure, or being of adventure such as myself, carrying your little thermo stabber? And what's worse, like the super cold water or like falling on rock. And I'm basically the only driver out here to drive back home, so I need to be fully intact. If not, we'll be stranded. So I was already up there, but it was just started getting like the wobbly leg. I have a lot of friends who've become like mountain climbers now. Maybe should ask them if this is like a good idea or not. So the getting back down process is going to be kind of, well, I didn't know I could stretch my legs that much. Oh, fuck. Whew, that hurt. But you can see I'm technically up there. Okay, there was another little stepping stone here. I didn't have to do like a Van Damme split. Already getting rather dehydrated. I guess what I'd like to call an example of trying to tame your fear. I suffer a little bit from vertigo. Should have brought a water bottle, regroup, gather the courage, and I'll do the final climb up. All right, I'm gonna get some water. See, in here it seems kind of... Okay, that wasn't that high. So I don't know, what do you think? Do you think I'll be able to conquer this this boulder? Some of the world's top mountain climbers have tried. None have really succeeded to conquer the summit. Trying to change that here today. If you don't have water, make sure to procure it somehow. Let's do this. Let's do this. How did I even get up here? So here we are at the spot again to gather my energy, expending it unnecessarily, which is it's a rookie mistake. Take a couple of breaths, gather your bearings, like north, east, west, south. Anxiety. You can do this, you can do this. Come on. That would be my recommended technique for going down, because I could probably get back to this position, but I realized if you do the mountain climber torque, which is basically make sure your hands have a good grip and you stick your butt out as far as you can, and that allows you to gain sight of what's underneath you. And there I can see that little spot, which is quite a bit, but I'm gonna say, tame your fear. See, already panic sets in. Okay. We can say technically I'm up. Now I just need to relax and be like, okay, I thought I'd be more graceful up here, but apparently I'm not. Oh, okay. Now I'm stuck. Well, hopefully it was worth it. Heart's racing a little bit. It'll be all right. It's gonna be all right. Any kind of cell phone signal. I'm gonna take a picture of my face just to commemorate this moment of panic, or camera in the background down there. You can see it for scale. Ooh, vertigo, vertigo, vertigo. So what have we learned? Not much really, just like primarily asking myself the question, why did I do this? Why did I think this was a good idea? Because if we could bring a mattress out, I could maybe jump on the mattress. So, okay, so this is a good way to say how do you tame your fear? Right now you're fine. You could stay here for a while. You're not gonna get anywhere just sitting here. So it's time to think of the descent and not die. Remember the reverse twerk. So yeah, so as I said, we didn't do a lot of reading today, but it was more about learning about survival. Fucking mosquito trying to get me when I'm vulnerable up here. So yeah, many times we'll do things that will put us in a situation where we need to face our fears and we need to push through. But pushing through will get us to this other level where once again we need to face our fears in a much different way. Where it's like, okay, we've gotten to this point, but it's the point of no return. Well, hopefully there is a return. But you need to do something or you will be stuck. And I guess that's the perfect metaphor of this rocky friend of ours here. If I do nothing, I'll be stuck up here, fall victim to the mosquitoes and the horseflies, then to the mink, who are little psychopaths. They just enjoy killing for fun, so I'd be weakened by the mosquitoes. The army of mink would crawl up here, start nibbling at my toes to see how much energy I have, and then probably go for my throat. And that would be it. Then maybe the bald eagle would come that I saw the other day and do some pickings. And yeah, it wouldn't be a pretty sight. I mean, of all the spots to go, this one's, halfway decent, but nevertheless, it is not time yet. I still have many an episode to bring you, many an analysis to make, so it is not time yet. I need to continue for you and for me and the entire human race. Oh, just realized that this rock is loose here, so maybe I'll get rid of that. So you can see this is not a green screen or a special effect. I wonder if I could chip away at this rock and reduce it in size and then just climb off. That would be thinking outside the box, where you don't need to use your brute manpower, muscle to climb back down, but rather the gift of intellect